or change to the list, just let us know. You can call the church office and we'll get that sorted. Also, there were a lot of handouts that Linsey will be referencing throughout the evening. And so if you didn't get one, now's your chance to go grab one. And that's all I have. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm very, very grateful to Linsey for coming and leading us this evening.
Hello, everyone. Okay, here we go with the clicker. I am out of my comfort zone here with this mic thing on my, okay, so bear with me as I get used to all that during our presentation tonight. I am so grateful for the opportunity to come speak with y'all about mental health and how to support our children and teens regarding mental health and wellness. If we can go to the next slide. Oh wait, I have a clicker. Hold on. Just the top button? Oh, okay. That's me up on the slides. My name is Linsey Schafer. I have close roots to Denton. My father-in-law is a former pastor here in Denton. My mother-in-law works for the Denton Baptist Association. I have been in Denton for quite a while now. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I have a master's in social work. I will graduate in May with my doctorate in social work from the University of Louisville. Fingers crossed. So, yeah, I'm very tired. But I'm so excited to be here with y'all tonight. I have spent 16 years of my career in school settings as a crisis counselor and school social worker. So when I speak about these things, a lot of my practice experience comes from school settings. Currently, I work at Connections Wellness Group. We're a mental health provider here in the area. We have 12 locations around the Metroplex, but our headquarters is in Denton. So Connections provides counseling, psychiatry, and day treatment programs for children, adolescents, and adults for mental health and for disordered eating. So just to give you kind of a brief overview about who I am and why I'm here to talk to you tonight. So, all right, let's see if I can do this. Which button do I hit? Oh, okay. These are our objectives for tonight. If you all want to sign in, clicking that QR code with your phone, feel free to do that right now. If you choose to do that, you don't have to. I will email you all of the handouts that we're doing tonight so you have them electronically as well. Some of the things I'm going to send you have active hyperlinks in them, so it might be easier to access them digitally. So feel free to sign in if you want to. Certainly not a necessity. Okay. So I will also give one more disclosure before we really dive into our content for the night. I am hearing impaired, so I do wear a hearing aid. So if you ask questions and I'm like getting really close to hear you, I have my hearing aid turned all the way up, but I may have to still come get close to you to hear your questions. So I will try to be as engaged as possible and would love to answer any questions that y'all have throughout the presentation and then at the end of the presentation as well. I have way more slides than we can cover tonight, but I wanted to print them all so you had access to them. So we will skip a few parts of the presentation, but please know that all the content is in your printed handout. Okay? Any questions, comments, concerns before we get started? Okay. Okay. I wonder if this is, yeah, this is a fun little thing right here. Okay. Just as a warning, things that we'll be discussing tonight are very heavy in nature. They are sensitive. Be kind to yourself and others. If you need to step out and take a break, please do so. Do whatever is best for you in this moment, in this space. Okay. Let's see. Okay. All right, what is mental health? Mental health is the capacity to interact with one another in the environments in ways that promote subjective well-being, optimal development, and the use of mental health abilities, mental abilities. Why are we talking about this tonight? 1 in 5 teenagers have a mental health condition and will be diagnosed with a mental illness by age 14, and 75% begin in their mid-20s. So that means that more teens than we think and are aware of are struggling with a mental health challenge right now. And it's really important that the caring and trusted adults in their lives know how to support them in times of mental health crisis. 70% of teens do not receive the care they need, and it is critically important that we connect them to care. Apologies also your packet is stapled backwards. I don't know if you've noticed, but we will do the absolute best we can with that. This next slide is the 8 dimensions of wellness. We're not going to review them, but please take a moment to review that on your own time and be familiar with, when we think of self-care and wellness, we think of physical and mental health, but there's so much more that encompasses wellness than just those 2 dimensions. So common adolescent mental health diagnoses. The first thing I want to talk about is ADHD. This is a term I'm sure we're all familiar with. We've heard many times, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It is an ongoing pattern of hyperactivity or sensory needs and that interacts with and functions, it impacts our ability to function on a daily basis. So marked by inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity, and it is more frequent in males and females, a 2-to-1 ratio. MDD, major depressive disorder, is another thing that you might hear anyone talking about. Oh, I'm depressed. Depression is not, I've been down or low in mood for a couple days. Depression is diagnosed by an extended period of marked time dealing with extreme lows. So the onset occurs in a lot of folks around puberty, and females experience 1.5 to 3 times more depression than males. There are theories that potentially males experience a lot of depression too, but they're not as apt to talk about those feelings as females are. So it is projected to be the #1 diagnosed disease in the world by 2030, according to some of the empirical literature. GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, is excessive ongoing anxiety and worry that are difficult to control and interfere with your ability to function on a daily basis. So we all experience anxiety. Every single person does. Getting up and talking in front of people brings out anxiety. Taking a test, doing something new, right? Sometimes it is gastrointestinal in nature. We get it that way. Sometimes we get flush or whatever. It is anxiety that impedes your ability to function on a daily basis. I can't go to work. I can't do my job. I can't interact with people in a social setting. That is GAD. That is your generalized anxiety disorder. Approximately 32% of teens are diagnosed with anxiety disorder in 2020. And I can tell you, pre and post-COVID, those numbers continue to rise in our teens. Females are twice as likely to be diagnosed with GAD. Again, I wonder if our males are talking about those disorders as much and what they're experiencing. The last diagnosis I want to talk about is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of us have heard this in reference to veterans or frontline workers who might experience incredibly high levels of stress and trauma in their workplaces or experiences, but our youth and our adolescents can also experience PTSD from an extremely traumatic event or series of events. So this disorder may occur in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event or series of events, and it is higher with Latinos, African Americans, and Native Americans. And children are likely to experience these symptoms in nightmares or flashbacks and those kinds of relived experiences. So it doesn't necessarily come back as words or them being able to express that trauma, but it comes back as a reaction instead. Okay. Aha. Okay, so mental health signs and symptoms, major warning signs that a child or an adolescent might be experiencing a mental health occurrence. There's a significant rise in anxiety in the general public and even more in relation to their family, technology, again, impeding their ability to function on a daily basis or saying that they can't function without a device or something to help them get through. Increased aggression, rage, truancy or elopement from school or activities, talk of feeling like a burden. I will highlight that word a couple times. That is an extremely worrisome word if we hear youth using that word. Extreme mood swings, substance use or abuse, self-harming behaviors or gestures, or suicidal behaviors or attempts. Minor warning signs include self-defeating statements, withdrawing, isolating, becoming reclusive, not being able to make eye contact any longer, and nervousness more than usual. Disrupted sleep, either too much or too little. Same with appetite, overeating or undereating. You're seeing extreme changes in that behavior pattern. Sudden change in their appearance, in their friend group, decreased interest in things that they really used to love and be very engaged in, and any distinctive deviation from their personality that is very out of character for them. Okay, we're gonna move into trauma, and this is one of those areas that we're gonna fly through because we don't have time to talk about all of the stuff tonight. If I can get the clicker to do its thing. Look at that. All right, so there are several different types of trauma that we talk about regarding mental health. So acute trauma is the result of a single stressful event. So an example of acute trauma might be a car accident. That was the stressful event, then there was no other stressors related to that person experienced. It was that isolated event. By and large, folks that are dealing with mental health issues have more than one trauma that they've experienced. So chronic trauma is the result from repeated or prolonged exposure to events. So think about abusive situations that stress on, or living in a household with domestic violence, or someone who's using substances. Those are extended traumas, chronic traumas. Complex is the result from exposure to multiple traumatic events. So I had the car accident, I also come from a household that has abuse, and then there was COVID, so there was that trauma on top of it, and then there was, right? So secondary and vicarious trauma is those who are the helpers, who work with people who've experienced trauma, so we get re-exposed to their trauma and experience it that way. It could also be the family members or friends of someone who's experienced trauma, so y'all are absorbing it, right? Our youth pastors, our pastors who are listening to this are experiencing that trauma secondhand, and it impacts us as well. Okay, what is the impact of trauma? People who experience trauma have a loss of safety. They don't feel safe in their spaces, in their body, with their people. Everything becomes very uncertain for them, and they don't trust themselves as much either. There's a loss of danger cues, so I can't always tell when things are good or bad for me anymore because of that. Again, loss of trust, shame, loss of intimacy. I don't want to get close to each other or trust someone again. Dissociation, which essentially means I want to separate myself from the actions and the things I'm in, so I just really it feels like I'm watching the things that are happening around me from a distance. That's what that term means. Loss of sense of self, loss of sense of self-worth, and reenactment. So acting out the traumatic events or exhibiting behaviors that are different than their norm. Okay, let's see if I get this to work. Okay, really quickly, trauma changes our baseline. So the more trauma someone experiences, the more that their baseline changes. So for someone who's experienced that one event and then has really strong support systems and an environment that is there for them, when they have a trauma, they're going to go back close to that baseline where they started. So that lower line near the dotted line. For someone that's experienced chronic trauma and so many things in their life, don't get back down to that baseline anymore. So my brain and my chemistry has actually changed because of all the traumatic events I've experienced in my life, which makes the need to seek support services even more essential. Okay, so trauma responses. Have any of y'all ever heard fight, flight, freeze before? I have head shaking, yay. Okay, so there's an additional one that I'm gonna throw your way. Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So really briefly, fight is when I act out in response to my trauma. I'm either gonna yell or scream or have a behavioral disruption, or I'm really restless, or I wanna skip school. I'm having some at-risk behaviors. Flight is I'm withdrawing, I don't wanna be here, I am skipping class, I'm not going to church anymore, I don't wanna socialize with anyone, all of those kinds of behaviors. Freezing is exhibiting numbness, that dissociation again. I'm not attached to my feelings. I don't want to talk about my feelings. I don't want to engage in any of that. And then fawning, this is your people pleaser. This is the one that's using that social outlet to cope with trauma. This is faking responses to please others, bargaining to get certain behaviors met. So this is a newer one that's come to attention, but it is certainly a coping response of many. Okay, just some stats here. I don't know if anyone's heard adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, but that's something I wanted to bring to y'all's attention. We won't dive deep into this tonight. Essentially, if you experience some really negative things in your childhood, they impact you as an adult. So the more negative pieces you experience, the more positive supports it takes to undo those negative childhood experiences. So in a nutshell, that's what the ACEs mean. So this slide shows you the impact of trauma and exposure to ACEs. So 6 in 10 people experienced at least one negative childhood event, and 1 in 6 people experienced 4 or more. In your slide deck, you'll see at the bottom, there is an option to discover your ACE score. It is about a 10-question quiz. It is extremely, there's some personal and hard to read things in there. So if you do choose to go and take that to see what your ACE number is, just know that it is a very sensitive quiz. But it offers some insight into how some folks do experience mental health challenges later on if they have a lot of adverse childhood experiences. So I'm gonna skip the rest of the ACE part so we can get to more mental health topics. Does anyone have any question about ACEs? Okay. See if I can get my clicker to click. Okay, that's find your ACE score if anyone's interested, but it is in your packet as well. Okay, trauma-informed responses are essentially the caring adult, the person who's supporting that youth, instead of saying, "What's wrong with you? Why'd you do that? Blah, blah, blah." It is, "What happened to you? What's going on in your world? Let's sit and talk about it so that we can respond in a way that is restorative for you rather than going to continue to exacerbate the issue before." So becoming familiar with ways to reframe and rethink about the ways that we respond to youth in crisis is really, really crucial. So you cannot regulate someone or help your child, a youth, someone in your world if you're dysregulated. So if you are not using your whole wise mind in a calm, cool fashion, then you probably will not be able to help an adolescent or a child regulate either. So, shifting from trauma, how does this all relate? Well, we know that people who experience trauma experience higher levels of mental health issues and concerns. So, want to dive straight into anxiety, which is one of the most common things that I saw in my practice in schools and also now in private practice. Okay, so what is anxiety? We've talked briefly about this, but it is the intense, excessive, and persistent worry and fear about everyday situations. Fast heart rate, rapid breathing, sweating, and feeling tired may occur. Anxiety can be normal, and we can normalize that there are healthy levels of anxiety that press us to do our best and achieve and be better, but there are levels of anxiety that impede our ability to function on a daily basis. They become all-consuming, and we can't see past the fog of anxiety. So, 1 in 4 teens will have an anxiety disorder. An estimated 31.9% of adolescents had an anxiety disorder. The impact of COVID. The occurrence of anxiety symptoms has doubled since the pandemic. And if we think about it, our students were at home on their computers, they didn't have social interactions, there's a lot of different kinds of stressors and the worry about getting sick, all the exposure to social media. So there was certainly increased bullying levels that led to increased anxiety as well. Anxiety impacts females more. We've talked about this already. The prevalence of anxiety disorders among adolescents was higher for females, 38%, than compared to males at 26%. Again, are the males talking about it? Unsure. 1 in 5 adults is estimated to have an anxiety disorder as well. What is anxiety? There are several different kinds of anxiety disorders. There's a panic disorder. There's your generalized anxiety disorder, which is the most common diagnosis that you'll see with anxiety. There's agoraphobia. That's the fear of going outside into public. There is specific different types of phobias, fear of different kinds of things. Social anxiety disorder, also sort of prevalent in some of our teenagers. PTSD, which we've talked about. Obsessive compulsive disorder, which is getting very focused on specific thoughts or obsessing over particular habits or routines. And those thoughts are very pervasive, and often the person does not want them impeding in their mind over and over again. And then lastly, a separation anxiety disorder, which we see a lot in folks that have been adopted or been through the foster care system. Okay. All right. Anxiety in children and teens. Children and teenagers may have similar worries as adults, but they have things that they worry about too, just like adults do. So performance or school, sporting events, family members' safety, being on time, and then just the 24-hour news cycle of what's happening in our world constantly. We're in war at 2 different places, like there's natural disasters happening, another school shooting. All of those things are constantly in the hands, minds of our children and adolescents, which we weren't exposed to as kids because there wasn't smartphones at that point. Okay, y'all, I'm sorry about this clicker. Okay, all right. We've talked about this a little bit, but some anxiety is normal, right? And I think we can work to normalize that in our kids by saying, like, this amount is going to press you to do better. But it's when we start seeing that they can't do things, they can't do everyday living activities, that we need to intercede and get them support services to help with that. Interfering with relationships, deterioration of functioning occurs. So I don't shower as much anymore. I'm not brushing my teeth. I'm not combing my hair. I don't really care what I look like when I go out in public. Any of those normal functioning activities start to decrease. They feel depressed or irritable. Anxiety and depression go hand in hand many times. So you'll see those things co-occurring. They have trouble and may use substances, alcohol, drugs, to cope with that feeling of anxiety, because it goes away, at least for a little while, right, if I'm using. So that's one of those coping skills. And they may have suicidal thoughts or ideations because they want that feeling to stop or go away. Okay. All right, moving on to depression. Any questions about anxiety as we transition to this next topic? Okay. So what is depression? Depression is a common and serious medical illness that negatively impacts how you feel, the way you think, and how you act. It is treatable. Depression causes feelings of sadness, loss of interest in activities that you once enjoyed. It can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems, but it decreases your ability to function. So, how common is depression? Okay. We said at the beginning that some empirical research thinks that depression will be the #1 diagnosed disease by 2030. And I cited that article in case anybody wants to go back and read it. I will tell you that depression and anxiety are the most common things I see at Connections Wellness and that I saw with teenagers in the school system, which then led to things like non-suicidal self-injury and suicidal ideation, which is what we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about today. Okay. Yes, these are everything we're talking about is applicable to adults. I would say that the stigma is potentially stronger with adults even because they don't have as many outlets to talk about mental health and wellness. Students have counselors at school, they have folks at church or organizations' activities, so I feel like there's a possibility that adults are not reaching out for treatment or support as much. So, what does depression look like? Looks like feelings of sadness, loss of interest, changes in appetite, trouble sleeping, sleeping too much or sleeping too little, loss of energy, increased fatigue, feelings of worthlessness or guilt, difficulty concentrating or making decisions. Sometimes it looks like ADHD. It can mask. And I will say that they can be misdiagnosed for one another often. Becoming withdrawn, cranky and irritable, thoughts of death or suicide, self-injurious behavior, and often couples with anxiety. We talked about that co-occurring piece, and then decline in school and hygiene we've talked about as well. So, here we go. All right, depression in children and teens. Common signs and symptoms of depression in children and teens are similar to those as adults, but there can be some major difference. In younger children, symptoms of depression may include sadness, irritability, clingy, worry, aches and pains, refusal to go to school, and then in teens, symptoms may include sadness, basically teens can express themselves more than little children can. So they can use their words, but they also make risky behaviors like skipping school and using substances as signs that something's not going well for them. All right, so we've talked about anxiety, then we bridged over depression. We know that those things can co-occur often in children, teens, and adults. And now we're gonna move into NSSI. Has anybody ever heard that term before? Okay, so this is the clinical term for non-suicidal self-injury. Y'all might hear this as self-harm, as cutting, as self-injurious behavior, but NSSI is the very clinical term for that. So this can come in a lot of different forms when we talk about NSSI. I think the most common and the one that most folks are familiar with is cutting. So a youth or an adolescent or adult would use anything that they could to bring harm to themselves through that cutting motion. In the school setting, I saw a lot. So students would, of course, use razors, but if someone wants to engage in self-harm bad enough, they will find something to use to harm themselves. So I've seen pencil sharpeners deconstructed. I've seen students break coffee mugs to use the glass or the handles to cut themselves. So again, the safety scissors, there are so many avenues. If someone wants to engage in that behavior as an outlet, they can find means. Self-harm is the act of deliberately hurting yourself. It's not generally meant as a suicide attempt. It is a way to cope with stressors, anxiety, depression, negative feelings, senses of shame, guilt, anger that they don't know how to give words to or how to seek help for or what to do, how to process that information, but they know that that makes them feel better in that moment to cope as a release. It also, I've had students say this a lot when we talked about why they engaged in that behavior, because I was numb. I wasn't feeling anything, and I wanted to feel something, and this gave me something to feel. Again, that inability to really express themselves and what they're feeling, and NSSI is an outlet to help express those emotions. All right, here we go. Projector thing. We can do. All right. So, who engages in non-suicidal self-injury? Most common among adolescents and young adults who identify in the LGBTQ+ community. There are higher rates in those who have experienced bullying. For children, some studies suggest that the percentages as high as 8% of children engage in NSSI. Its most common form is biting, kicking, scratching, picking, and hair pulling in children. For adolescents, approximately 15 to 20% of adolescents engage in NSSI. I would actually argue that that number is higher, but adolescents are really, really good at hiding it. And most common adolescent behaviors related to NSSI are scratching, cutting, burning, and then I would add picking at the skin, like pulling your skin until you bleed. For adults, approximately 12 to 24% of adults engage in NSSI. The most common forms are cutting and burning. I had students that would take hangers and use them, make brands out of them to burn, or cigarette butts, or the things. I had boys who would punch lockers, and I had to talk to them about that. Like, that is a form of self-harm. You're making your knuckles bleed. You are bringing pain to yourself to release that outlet. So don't think of self-harm solely as cutting. It can encompass so many other pieces than that we do need to seek help for and address those behaviors. There's a frequent need for privacy and sensitive behavior in folks that are engaging in self-harming behaviors. There's changes in mood, including frequent irritability, hostility, and anger, uncontrolled crying, and excessive sadness that potentially they're not able to express. There is frequent mention of self-injury in creative writing, artwork, journals, internet postings, emails, texts, so on and so forth. And there's frequent high-risk behaviors involving risk to child that exceeds normal adolescent behaviors, right? There's a certain amount of impulsivity that goes along with being an adolescent. Like, your brain's not fully formed, you don't always make the best choices, but when these exceed kind of normal adolescent behaviors, we need to step in because out of concern. Okay. All right. Why do people engage in non-suicidal self-injury? So my slides are very out of order. This is, I don't know if y'all are experiencing the same thing on your page, but I'm gonna look up here. Reasons people engage in NSSI: it allows the person to express pain, relieve tension, calm themselves, or feel nothing at all. The behavior often feels effective in the short term as it can create an initial feeling of relief, again, from that pain or numbness. And it is a release of endorphins. So it's that dopamine dump, the same thing we get from someone liking our post or following our page. The same thing happens when you engage in that self-harm behavior. It releases a dash of dopamine to your brain, which then drives us to want to engage in that behavior over and over again to get that same sense of high. It can be used as a form of punishment. If someone is, again, feeling that shame or guilt and feels like they deserve the harm. It can be an outcry when they're unable to verbalize that they're struggling. It is often easier to focus on physical pain, which is a concrete treatment, than the emotional pain, and giving words to that part. And then the immediate feeling of relief tends to reinforce the behavior, causing it to continue. The warning signs to look for: frequent or unexplained scars, wounds, burns, the crying, the irritability, the not being able to talk about their feelings, the reclusiveness, hiding from their loved ones when they don't usually do that. If you see students wearing bracelets this thick on their wrists, you know, like they're covering half their arms, maybe look under those bracelets every once in a while just to see what's there. Sometimes, and I'm not saying this because I don't know why teenagers wear hoodies in the summer, but they do, even when it's 137 degrees outside. But be mindful. Just every once in a while look to see if there is any self-harm there. If you're seeing corresponding behaviors that you think, hey, let's just be aware of this. If you see Band-Aids in weird places, if you see scars that don't look like a cat scratch, ask questions. Open and have that dialogue with them and foster that relationship so that they feel safe to disclose that to you as well. I'll get back to my notes over here. Unexplained withdrawal from activities. Again, mention of self-injury or watching videos of others self-injuring or sharing posts like that. Just be aware of what's happening with them so that you can be on the lookout. Okay. Oh, there we go. All right. Continued warning signs, what to look for. Don't be afraid to ask questions and foster the dialogue with teens about suicidal ideation and NSSI. Work to build trust so that they feel comfortable sharing. Talk with, you are the parents, so I'm talking with you right now, about securing sharp objects. So if someone is engaging in self-harming behaviors, put a safety plan in place at home. Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. First of all, thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. That is hard to hear. I said at the beginning, if someone wants to harm badly enough, they'll find an avenue to do that, right, as their release or as their... there is mixed reviews from counselor camps on that. So there is the idea that we need to keep them safe, keep eyes on them until we get them into treatment. And then there's the idea of, but if you take away that option and that choice, right. I tend to err on the side of let's put the safety plan in place and then get them into treatment. But there certainly is some research to back up the other avenue as well. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, though. It is difficult to know in those situations what to do. Right. And, you know, in those situations, I tend to, until we get them where we need to go, I tend to keep eyes on them all the time. So Yeah. And we'll talk more through those pieces, but thank you. I appreciate your vulnerability. So, safety plans in place. Seek professional help. So we're going to talk about levels of care in a little bit and what that kind of looks like. And we'll dive into that in detail, but getting them connected to the support services they need to help manage and cope with those things is really, really important. Find a calming activity, meditation, progressive muscle relaxation. I watch a YouTube video every day that helps me unwind, go to bed, do my whole routine. So engaging in those activities with them. Hey, let's model this behavior. Let's work through these processes together. Keep the hands busy. Crafts, writing, sewing, playing an instrument, drawing. I have kids that love to crochet, like that is their hobby. So finding, I know that's, I don't have the patience, but some of my students really love that. So finding ways to keep their hands engaged is another way to kind of move past the NSSI behaviors and find another outlet for that movement. Work with adolescents to develop emotional regulation tolerance. This is really hard because sometimes as adults we don't even know how to regulate our own emotions. Self-soothing, so being able to do the 5 senses with them or being able to do box breathing. So we're going to do it together right now so everyone walks away knowing some of these tools, okay? So my personal favorite is the 5 senses. Are you all ready? Everyone's ready. Okay, so hold up your hand. We're going to do 5. So this is what we're going to do. When we trace our hand up, thumb, we're breathing in, holding at the top, breathing out, holding in. Okay, got it with me? All right, here we go. Breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold, breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold, in, hold, out, hold, in, hold, out, hold, in, hold, and out. And you can say, do you need to take another 5? Because we can do it again. All right, and now you'll know that's the easiest little trick. There's also box breathing, which I love. This is so simple. So we trace it, we have a box in the air. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm in, out, in, out, right? We're breathing. We're regulating our breath so that our brain starts to work again. And we're teaching our children and adolescents how to do that too. Here's the other thing. I can be sitting in the middle of class, youth group, whatever, and I can do that and no one will ever know. I just put my hand down and start tracing it and doing my breathing or, you know what, making the box in my brain. No one ever has to see those things. There are so many different ways that you can start to regulate again. One of my favorite that is really hard for me is saying the alphabet backwards because I can't do it, never can. But it makes me get distracted from every other thought that's happening, trying to go Z, Y, W. I can't do it every time, and then I have to start back over at the beginning and work my way that direction as well. So finding things and tools and tricks for you, for your child, for the adolescent in your life to help re-regulate, focus the mind elsewhere so that they can come back with a full brain, with oxygen that's working and pumping up there to make wise-minded choices is essential. So do practice this. If you signed in, I'll send you a coping skills packet that I made that has a lot of different tricks like that in it as well. Okay, where were we? Hands busy. Oh, we were talking about self-soothing. Some of my kids like biting into lemons. I know that's a weird one, but do you think that would shock your palate and make your brain think of other things, right? Like that's a whole different thing right there. So lotion, listening to music. Again, be mindful of the kind of music. We don't need to put sad music on to make us even more sad, but maybe making a playlist and having that ready to go in moments where we need to re-energize or redirect our thought patterns. Using stress ball. I usually bring fidgets, but I did not have enough for the group tonight. But if you guys know like fidget spinners and infinity cubes and poppets and all of those kinds of things, have those on hand. Let's keep the hands busy and engaged. Drinking water or cold beverage, yoga, word searches. I love a Sudoku and a Wordle, so keeping yourself engaged in those capacities is really important as well. Changing your body chemistry through temperature. Taking a cold shower to switch the brain composition up, going for a walk, finding the pressure points, anything that you can do to kind of reframe the body as well. getting active, getting the heart rate up. This is why exercise is such a release of natural endorphins and dopamine, again, to get that rush and that high that they're searching for, but in a way different manner. Okay. Questions about NSSI, non-suicidal self-injury. Okay. All right, we're going to move on to suicidality. Maybe, there we go. Suicide is the voluntary act of taking one's own life. Again, this is really sensitive subject matter, so please do take care of yourself and step out if you need to. Okay, this is a very hard to see chart, and I do apologize for that. Infographic. Suicide, approximately 1 in 5 teens, 22%, had seriously considered attempting suicide in the last 12 months. 46%, almost half of those teens, had formulated a plan, meaning that they had given consideration to how and when they would attempt suicide. And girls are twice as likely to have seriously considered suicide. We saw during COVID that dipped a little bit, unsure why, but now the rates have started to rise a lot. Girls are more likely to attempt, boys are more likely to complete. Okay, so correlating factors. We talk about co-occurrence of disorders. They're searching the web, they're experiencing body or self-image problems, violence at home or in school, and addictions to drugs. So when we talk about things that coexist, we're looking at other mental illness, we're looking at substance use, bullying, etc. Okay. Man, I was on a roll there for a second. Okay. Suicide among youth and adults. This is for pediatricians, but I think everyone should know this information. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in ages 15 to 34. This is outdated, 15 to 34. That statistic should shock us all into being proactive and to helping folks around us. Teen suicide rates differ by gender. Again, we've kind of covered that. Men are more likely to complete. So you're seeing that rate represented right there, while girls are more likely to attempt. All right. Risk factors. Who is at risk for suicidality? Teens who identify in the LGBTQ+ community, new immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, teens who experience bullying, perceived or limited support at school, at home, in their organizations, high achievers, those who are, like we think about our AP, pre-AP, dual credit, IB students. Again, there's a lot of additional stress there. Those that have lost a family member or a really close friend to suicide are far more likely to attempt as well. History of abuse in their life, those who have poor coping skills, history of suicidal ideation, attempts or hospitalization. Medication issues, so medication mismanagement, can actually exacerbate. Psychotropic meds, if not prescribed carefully and wisely and matching the chemistry of that person, can raise suicidality rates. Low self-esteem, life changes, substance use abuse, access to weapons, impulse control, and coexisting conditions. Warning signs to watch out for. You're going to notice that a lot of these mirror things that we talked about with anxiety and depression. So withdrawing, impulsivity, risky behaviors, flat affect, like the face never changes no matter what we're talking about, how excited we are, what we're engaged in or doing. Guarded or secretive, again, it goes along with those withdrawing behaviors, and I just don't want people to know what's happening. Deceptive, in denial, sleep disturbances, appetite disturbances, we've seen this again. Getting rid of personal belongings, this is a huge red flag. If you see someone who's giving away their personal things, please be aware. If you hear the person use the word, I'm a burden, or I don't want to cause trouble, or I'm too much trouble, please take action immediately. Psychosomatic issues, so again, experiencing like chronic pain, that increases levels of suicidality as well. Anxiety, depression, behavioral changes, substance use, helplessness or hopelessness. Writing or drawing about death and starting to say goodbyes. If you see any written work or a goodbye letter, again, we need to act immediately on that. Okay. All right. How do we provide support? I feel like this slide is out of order. Okay, we'll come back to that. How to be there for those experiencing suicidality. Be fully present with them in that space. Listen to them actively. Don't judge. Use reflective listening. So I hear you saying X, Y, and Z and repeating it back to them in a calm, collected tone, but not judging them or getting upset when they disclose that really sensitive information to you. Taking it seriously and seeking help immediately. Never ever agree to keep suicidal thoughts or self-harm confidential. Those need to be reported to whoever the needed party. If it's your child, then we need to get them help with a treatment facility, counseling agency, whatever the level of care that's needed is. If it is someone else's, that we report to the guardian. If we need to involve church leadership or whoever to get support, act immediately. Y'all, I'm so sorry. Okay. How to help continued. So here's some good questions to ask. If you're sitting with someone who has bravely disclosed these feelings of suicidality to you, how can you respond to them? Ask them honestly and openly, are you thinking about killing yourself or hurting yourself? And then follow up with these questions. When was the last time you had these thoughts? How often are you having these thoughts? How long did these thoughts last when you get them? Is it 5 minutes? Is it an hour? Do you feel like these thoughts control you, or do you control the thoughts? In other words, can you redirect them when they come, or is it like they have taken over and they're so dominant in your world? How strong are the thoughts? I like to use scales for this because that's oftentimes easier, especially for children and teens. So saying 10's high, 1's low. How strong are they on that scale? They're an 8? Okay, well, we know. They're a 3, you don't have a plan, so maybe we need a lower level of care, right? So we're gathering information when we're talking to them. Do you have a plan? This is potentially one of the most important questions that you'll ask them. If someone has a plan for suicide, we need to put a safety plan in place immediately and be aware to keep them safe until we get them to the necessary treatment, okay? That is a very serious red flag. Oops. Do you have the means to carry out the plan? Have you ever attempted suicide before or engaged in self-harm? And then what is happening that has you thinking about suicide? Again, it's that trauma-informed response, like, why are you thinking about that? Don't think about that. Your life's so good. You don't need to respond like that. You don't need to think like that. But like, no, tell me, what's going on that you feel this way? Your life, you have so much value. Tell me what's happening. I'm here for you. I support you. All right, things to remember. Be direct. Don't beat around the bush. They have made this really sensitive disclosure to you, so now you're engaged. You're invited into their world to talk to them about it. So be honest and open. Talk openly and matter-of-factly. Be available. Make time. If you're busy, whatever you're doing at that point, we have to reframe, redirect, and be with that person wholly in that moment. Show interest and support. I know that I don't need to say this, but I have had experiences in the past where folks dared someone to complete it. They were like, yeah, right, go ahead and do it then. I'm done, I'm tired, I'm over it. Don't have that kind of conversation. Don't engage someone to do that. Don't act shocked at their disclosure. Again, it's that be non-judgmental. So we're leaning in. We want to learn more. We are here for you. We're here to support. And we're not coming from a place of judgment. That only puts a distance between you and the person that shared that disclosure with you. Offer words of hope and be there to take action with them. Put a safety plan in place immediately. And this is geared towards counselors and other helping professionals. So y'all are the guardians. So put a safety plan in place immediately. Whether that's weapons, especially if they have a plan and intent, remove those means and then get them to their treatment option. Seek crisis intervention. One of the things I like to tell folks too is like once someone has made that disclosure, even if it's an adult, don't leave them alone. Stay with them, make sure that they're safe until they get to that next step in their treatment. Okay, here is a tool. Feel free to it's in your packet, but you can do this from the screen as well. This is a really commonly used by clinicians suicide screening tool. For your reference, it has more questions and things that you could ask someone if they've expressed suicidality. It's called the Columbia Screener. It's from Columbia University. A lot of clinicians use it, and I wanted to provide it for you so you guys could see what that looks like. Okay, now we're going to dive into levels of care. I'm going to start here with this chart. Is anyone familiar with levels of care? Yes, okay. All right, I'm going to do my ladder of levels of care, so please enjoy as I act this out for you. Okay, we're going to pretend like mental health care is a ladder, okay? The bottom rung, when I climb on that ladder, is counseling. That is when I meet with someone once a week, every other week, to process, work through trauma, work on personal healing, okay? If I needed a slightly higher level of care, the next rung up that ladder is psychiatry and medication management. So sometimes someone just needs counseling. Sometimes someone may just need medication management and psychiatry. Oftentimes, a combination of both is the most successful for some people. So that's my second rung up that ladder, right? I'm working with a psychiatrist. I see them usually once every 2 to 3 months for my medication management. The next rung up that ladder is intensive outpatient, IOP. So now when you see all these letters, you're going to be like, I know what that means. So IOP, this is when someone is in intensive therapy for 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. So yeah, it's pretty intense. But they are safe enough to go home in the evenings. So the risk, the threat, the level of harm is not so much that they need to be inpatient at a facility, right? So there's a safety plan in place at home. They don't have access or means to anything that they could hurt themselves with. Maybe their thoughts of suicide are passive. That's the appropriate placement for an IOP setting. Does that make sense? Okay. Dealing with heavy anxiety, depression, that's my IOP kind of setting. The next rung up that ladder is PHP, Partial Hospitalization Program. I strongly dislike the nomenclature here because it's not a hospital. We're not in a hospital setting, so I wish someone would change that for me. But PHP is essentially 4 hours a day, 5 days a week in your treatment setting. So you're getting that intensive therapy, again, similar to IOP, but for a longer period of time. You're seeing your therapist every single day for 4 hours a day, okay? Think how much work and processing, and it's hard work that we're doing in that time span. You see your psychiatrist, your nurse, you get all of those wraparound supports in that program. It would take me a very long time in individual counseling that meets once a week or every other week to get the same level of care that I'm going to get from a PHP IOP, right? So if I started at PHP and worked my way down to IOP, I'm looking at anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks of treatment. It is not a quick process, but when you're working through those mental health issues, you need that intensive level of care. Okay, so we've done counseling, psychiatry, medication management, IOP, PHP. My next rung up the ladder is inpatient. Inpatient is for someone with a really high acuity, so there is an imminent threat of harm to self or other. There is access to means, there is maybe active psychosis or something happening where that person is no longer safe. So inpatient is a 7 to 10 day placement to make sure that that human is safe, that they are getting that 24/7 monitoring, that their medication is getting managed, right? So that then they can ideally step down into a PHP program, then to an IOP, then to outpatient counseling, right? So the same way we worked our way up that ladder, we're working right back down. Does that make sense? All right, I got some head nods. Okay, the highest level there that you'll see is Residential Treatment Center, RTC. This is for folks that have been up and down that ladder a couple of times. We've tried all of those options. Maybe we're still having issues. So that residential treatment is a placement that is inpatient and lasts anywhere from 30 days to 6 months, depending. So, all right, that's our levels of care. Clear as mud? Okay, any questions? Okay, so we'll go back to the sliders. Your outpatient providers, So remember, I go, but then I get to go home, right, in outpatient settings. So you've got psychiatrists who provide medication management. Psychologists provide specialized testing services to diagnose ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, anything like that. Okay, that's what your psychiatrists or psychologists are going to do. Counselors and therapists provide therapeutic services to individuals, couples, families. Okay, and then primary care is your wellness doctor. Okay, here we go. All right, outpatient care. So we've talked about this in depth, but there you've got outlined for you in your slides what a PHP is, what an IOP is, how long they last, and then, inpatient and residential treatment, same thing. We talked about those levels of support. So admission criteria for higher levels of care. When we're looking at inpatient, that's the active suicidality or homicidal intentions. It is psychosis, risky behaviors. Again, you're a threat of harm to yourself or others. Stealing, sneaking out at night, sexually acting out, substance abuse. Those are folks that need that immediate stabilization. PHP, IOP, passive suicidality, homicidality, acting out behaviors, mild, moderate substance abuse or use, and aggressive tendencies, but not so much that it would disrupt the process for someone else in that treatment facility, and increased depression, anxiety. Outpatient services, mild and moderate, depression, anxiety, and health disturbances. Something seems off or feels off, so you want to be proactive about getting that level of support. And then early stages of all those warning signs we've talked about on the previous slides. Okay, connecting to care. Did y'all know that we have this suicide crisis hotline now in America? It only took us 1,000,000 years to get it. If someone is experiencing suicidality or is in a mental health crisis, you can call 988. It will immediately connect you to someone in your local area, so someone who's familiar with our resources here. Denton County also just launched a mental health navigator system in the past month and a half, which is super exciting. So we have a clearinghouse run through Denton County Public Health now, where you can call and learn any of the area resources. Say, here's my presenting conditions and issues. What are my resources that are available to me? And that navigator will help connect you to resources. If you go to the Denton County Public Health Facebook page, LinkedIn page, whatever, you'll find that information there. And I will absolutely update my presentation and put that in as well. The other thing that I've provided y'all tonight, and I will send, if you signed in, I'll send you the digital copy of this. I try to keep a list of Denton area resources and referrals. So you may have grabbed this on the table out there. You'll see that lovely levels of care, just because I like to keep that fresh in everyone's brain. I think it's so important. And then I have a list. This is strictly a resource. This is not, I'm not like advertising for any agencies. I just want to provide resources of what's in our area. So you've got therapy practices that take commercial and private insurance. Then you've got therapy practices in our area that they take sliding scale or take Medicaid. You'll notice that list is really short, and I wish it was longer. But unfortunately, that's just not the case. Did y'all know that Texas is dead last in the nation for mental health care? 1 in 6 children is uninsured in the state of Texas. Okay. There's some fun stats for you. You've got outpatient care over here, and then inpatient care, crisis response. And then what I did special for this group tonight is I put a list of faith-based counseling agencies in our area. Again, I'm not like saying, it's just a resource, okay? And it's certainly not exhaustive either. There are other agencies, but this is just the ones I found to put on their list here. So I hope this is helpful. When I send this to y'all digitally, all of these are hyperlinked, so you can click directly on the link to take you to the agency's website to learn more and to explore and see if this is something that would be a good fit should you ever need that resource, okay? Any questions about this referral sheet or resource sheet? Okay, I'm hopeful that that is a helpful tool for y'all. Some other things that I prepared for y'all tonight, just as resources. You'll see how to help 10 tips to help your child with anxiety. This is a really nice little sheet just with some little tricks for you. And then I write a monthly newsletter, and October is Substance Abuse Prevention Month. So corresponding with my former life as a crisis counselor at a high school, I wrote about fentanyl because this is a really huge pandemic that we're facing. So you'll see that on the back table as well. This is extremely scary. Please educate yourself and your children about fentanyl as well. So, okay, any questions about resources in Denton County, in Texas, anything that y'all would like to know about any of those before we start to wrap up here? Okay, y'all are a quiet group tonight. All right. It is really important for you as caregivers, as the caring, supportive adults in the lives of children and adolescents, that you're taking care of yourself, that you're taking time to regulate you, that you're not letting your battery burn out. And that's hard to do when you're caring for someone else who's in a mental health crisis, but whatever that looks like and whatever boundaries that you can keep in place for yourself, please do that. Please do that. It is so important. And that may look like going to therapy for you, too, to help cope with that. All right, y'all. Any questions at this point? Yes? That is a great question. I do know that we had a $33 billion surplus this last session. None of it went to education and none of it went to mental health. So I don't know why, because we certainly have the data to show that we are experiencing, 90% of Americans think that we're in a mental health crisis right now. So I don't know why there's not more going into mental health treatment in the state of Texas. Our Medicaid and Medicare reimbursement rates are not great, which is why there's so few providers. So, I mean, I think it's so multi-tiered. We're also really low as far as physical health and folks having access to care here in the state. And you think about like all the rural territories too, those are mental health deserts. There's like no options for folks to seek care out there. So I think it's so multifaceted, and it makes me so very sad for our Texas family. So, yeah. It's ridiculous. Right. Right. It is. It is really, I mean, the cost of mental health care, even with insurance, I mean, think about it when you need a surgery. It's thousands of dollars, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I know. I wish I could be up here sunshine and roses, but mental health care is ridiculous expensive. It is, it's a travesty, honestly, that is not a priority in our country, in our state. So I'm hoping that tide will start to shift a little bit. And I think the more that we have educational opportunities like this and can work together to break the stigma and provide support and talk to folks about, hey, did you know that there's these levels of care? And did you know that these are signs and symptoms? And this is how people access services. And we need more services in our community because there's just not enough. I mean, that's essentially how Connections started, just talking about the place where I work. People were not going to their appointments because there was no psychiatry in Denton County at all in 2018. So until 2019, when we came, there's like a handful of providers. So folks weren't going to their appointments because I don't want to drive to Dallas to go see my psychiatrist, right? And then have to come back to Denton for my counseling appointment. So that's when we start to look at how can we do mental health care differently. And I think we together collectively as Texans need to really come together to advocate for better care. So yeah, other questions? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I can't make someone go to counseling, right? Do they have a caring adult in their life at all that they feel safe, like, opening up to? Okay. Okay. So I think, first of all, it's amazing that your daughter has opened up to you enough to like share what's going on so that you can work with her on some of those pieces and start to model like the healthy behaviors around like, this is good anxiety, this is bad anxiety, this is how we handle it and process it. And saying like, I'm really concerned that this is going to continue to snowball and get worse. So how can we collectively work on this together? Maybe that counselor was a bad fit. I talk about that. I talk about this a lot. Like sometimes finding a therapist is like buying shoes, right? Like the first pair may really be uncomfortable and not the right fit. So I have to keep going sometimes until I get the right one, which is unfortunate because again, mental health care is expensive. So every time you try a different therapist, it's, and then it's like, are we working on the right presenting issue? Is it anxiety or is there something else underlying or going on with that? So I wish I had a quick fix for you. Does she work with her school counselor at all? Is it the same person this year? Okay. And you could always reach out to the counselor and say, could you inconspicuously call her in for something else and start building that relationship about XYZ or grades or something, just to start fostering that rapport so that she's developing spaces and places with adults where she feels comfortable to start talking. If you want to hang out after, we can continue talking about other ideas. Any other questions? Treatment, questions about kids in school settings? Been around a while. Okay. I'll hang out, y'all. If you have any other questions, I am happy to stay. I'm so appreciative and honored that New Hope wanted to learn about mental health and engage in this conversation because it is so important. It's so important for our youth, for our adults, and for our Texas community. So thank you guys so much.
Okay. I realized, and we talked beforehand, that she covered a ton of material at like speed. I don't know if you felt that. I'm blowing my hair back there. But that's why she came as prepared as she did. Like we do so often here, we can't cover everything in a given setting, but we wanted to provide a foundation and a framework. You might be in a place tonight where none of this applies. Praise God. But there's going to come a day when you or someone in your life will experience some of this. And now, even if you don't remember everything, you have a resource. You know people you can turn to. You have these packets, there's more information. That was the big push for tonight, is to get some of this out there so that we can be thinking and be aware of it. And then two, I can speak for myself pastorally. There's so much of what I do encountering these things where I recognize my limits and I find people like this. Not that she is the Lord and could fix anyone, but she knows so much more than I do and knows where resources are, and she can help you find, like she said, this is really difficult to navigate. It's stressful, it's heavy on everyone. And so we as Christians and fellow church members can love and support family. Again, we're not going to bring you up on stage and have you, share all your details. But if I find out or if we find out you're going through this, we want to find ways to come alongside you and encourage you because it's heavy and it's confusing and it's expensive. It's really, really hard. And so we want to equip you as best we can with tools and resources to get moving in the right direction as we pray for you and find ways to support you. So as you probably saw, if not, please check, ask with her, or in the foyer on the table. She gave information. She also gave her card out. And so if something comes up, you have questions down the road or whatever, I don't want to put you on the line, but she's someone you can ask and she can point you in the right direction. There you go. Resources or whatever you might need. Again, trying to help any way that we can. Thank you so much for coming. You did a fantastic job. We are grateful. Before we dismiss tonight, unless there are any other questions, okay. I would like to close us in prayer, and I'd also like to pray for you in the work that you do, because we are grateful for you. So let's pray. God, we are so grateful tonight to know ultimately of our greatest resource in life, and it's you. Lord, you are there for us when we have needs, whether it's for us ourselves, for our loved ones. God, we know you listen when we cry out to you, and you work in so many ways, God, to heal and to strengthen, and sometimes, Lord, just to hold things together. And God, we know that you're at work even when we can't see it, and we thank you for that. We thank you for Linsey tonight and the time that she took putting this material together and then presenting it to us tonight, Lord. I know It was a lot to cover all at once, but I pray it was helpful. And Lord, I pray that we hold on to this information in case the day comes or the time comes that we need to draw on this information. Lord, we're not left scratching our heads, but we know some steps we can take to take care of ourselves and those that we love. Lord, we pray also for Linsey and the work that she does, that it's a difficult field, and dealing with things on the state side and legal matters and all sorts of issues that she mentioned some tonight, God, and the lack of resources and support, but then also just dealing with people and their brokenness in life in this broken world. And so we pray for her and the work that she does, Lord, that you give her strength, Lord, that you give her wisdom, that you encourage and strengthen her heart. Let her know that you are with her as she seeks to care for human beings who you love, God, and who are made in your image. And then, Lord, for all of us tonight, whether we're dealing with something ourselves or we have loved ones who are going through it, Lord, we just pray for a deep sense of your peace and daily, God, even moment-by-moment reminders that things are broken and hard now, but they will not always be that way, that there is an answer, that we have hope in Jesus Christ, and he is making all things new. So, God, we thank you, we praise you, we pray all these things in your holy name. Amen. All right, thank y'all so much.